Welcome to the Spaghetti Wall podcast, where we dive into life.
Both the messy parts and the moments of joy, and everything in between. I'm Jason Wilcox, licensed clinical social worker.
And I'm Dr. Tanay Lee, a licensed clinical psychologist.
You're not listening to me.
I am. I hear exactly what you're saying.
And that is what we're going to talk about on this podcast today. Have you ever been told you're not listening and it doesn't feel good? Or you feel like your partner's not listening and that doesn't feel good? But these are important topics to talk about because this can cause a divide in a relationship.
I think a lot of people get stuck when the argument is so heated and escalated, and then you feel paralyzed to respond. Sometimes I find myself in that situation when we talk about this topic.
You mean that you get paralyzed when someone says you're not listening to me?
Yeah, there's like this response internally where I'm aware that I hear what they're saying, and then the accusation that I'm not listening or I didn't hear them like makes me freeze inside.
Yeah, because it's very accusatory, right? It's this idea that someone's telling you that your truth is that you're not listening when you, in fact, in your mind, are listening to the other person. It feels very jarring. So what's the problem? I mean, we're kind of highlighting a situation here, but why would we even want to talk about this idea of not telling people you're not listening to me?
I think starting with a criticism or accusation like this does put people on the defense. Maybe people will freeze up. It feels like an attack. And so I think the receiver is going to have a hard time responding like productively to this.
Because it makes the situation very personal, right? When I tell somebody you're not listening to me, what I'm basically saying is that they're making a choice to not hear what I'm telling them, even though they might be listening to everything I'm saying to the best of their ability. And so when I start telling them they're not listening, it can start shutting people down. And it's not going to deal with whatever the real issue is or whatever's really going on, because we just coated it over with you're not listening to me.
So, Jason, would you say a more appropriate statement might be, I don't feel heard by you? Like, do we just switch it up into an I statement? Like, what would you suggest the appropriate non-violent communication statement might be?
Well, I'm a big fan of just moving to curiosity, if you can, right? If we're talking about a heated moment, I'm always going to encourage couples just take a pause. Because the issue when you're heated is there's a couple things going on. Your brain, the frontal lobe's going to now not be operating the way it needs to be operating for you to be thinking clearly. You're going to be filtering information really heavily through what we call negative core beliefs. There's an episode on that if you want to learn more about it, but you're going to be filtering information heavily in these heated moments. And so your partner or yourself, you're not really going to be able to hear your partner anyways. So if it's in one of those situations, I'd say just pause, step away. If you feel like you're not being listened to or your partner saying you're not listening to me, you're probably in a reactive state, need to go take a breath, calm down before you come back to the situation.
I think that's a great recommendation. As we're kind of talking about this, I think when I'm in that state, what I really, really want to say is, I don't feel like we're going anywhere with this conversation, instead of, you're not listening to me.
Yeah, I mean, however you want to take a pause, it's just finding a way to try to stop it for now.
So even saying, we just need to pause for a second could be helpful, more helpful than, you're not listening to me.
Right. Again, if you're in a reactive state and it's an argument. But if you're not necessarily in a reactive state and you're feeling like someone's not listening to you, that's where I would encourage you to go to curiosity. So it's more about, hey, I said X, Y, Z. Help me understand what connected or where you felt like there was a misunderstanding or what you understood from it.
I think some of the statements I was using was more about taking ownership and accountability, like saying, I'm feeling really activated by this. We need a pause. Saying, I don't feel heard by you. Saying, I don't think this conversation's going anywhere. But your recommendation, Jason, hits on just asking and checking in, like, "Hey, I said this. What did you hear? What are your thoughts of my opinion on this or my decision or where I want to go with this?" So just being curious and checking in.
Yeah. Again, if it's not a highly reactive state, because if it's a highly reactive state, I would move back to the pause. But if it's just a point in time where maybe you talk to your partner about trying to get the dishes done real quick and you leave and you come back and they're still playing their game or watching a show or something and you felt like they didn't listen to you, this would be a moment just to check in and say, "Oh, I was just checking in on the dishes." This gives your partner a chance to just explain, "Oh, yeah, I was just going to go as soon as the show's over," or "Let me finish this area of my game," or "Let me finish this chapter of my book," whatever they're doing. Let them have a chance to explain. This gives opportunity for you to learn what actually happened. It gives you opportunity to have a further conversation if something needs to be conversed about. But no one's getting accused of not listening when someone very well might have listened to you.
Yeah, that's true. I think about moments where you might hear what I've said, but then I don't see action, or there's non-compliance, or there's no follow-up, or there's no extra information given, right? So say, yeah, I might say, "Hey, can you do the dishes?" And you might have heard that, you might have nodded your head, and then I come back 2 hours later, the dishes aren't done. Yeah, and I might be like, "Oh, well, you weren't listening."
Or the other one that's come up, like even between you and I, where you'll talk about a preference you have in the middle of a conversation, and I'll either hear it, but I just hear it as like it's something you're going to want to do, and I don't realize that you're wanting both of us to do that. And all of a sudden, a month later, I'm doing it, and you're like, "Wait, I thought we talked about this." And that's a moment. If you say you're not listening to me, it wouldn't feel good because I did. Versus if you're like, "Oh, hey, what happened?" Or another example that's happened a couple times is you'll be like, "Hey, I thought we agreed not to do that." And my memory is shot anymore. And I'll be like, "We did?" I'm like, "I'm sorry. It wasn't about me not listening. It's just I forget things sometimes."
Yeah, and you make a great point. Sometimes I think a lot of times I speak to a very like maybe not as direct or assertive way of saying I like this to happen. Instead, I make it into a preference and it's not communicated as direct. And I think sometimes for us, it's been helpful in just having a summary at the end, like, "Hey, let's check back on, I said this. I just want to make sure we're on the same page." So, really making things very explicit is important and coming back and reviewing what was discussed if it are things that are really important and plans that need to happen.
Now, long term, there's a lot of side effects to this if you continue the behavior of telling somebody they're not listening to you. First off, the individual themselves, if you keep up that narrative of saying you're not listening to me and you're believing that, what you're doing is you're starting to create this dissonance, this distance in your relationship with your partner. And what you're going to do is you're going to start feeding those negative beliefs you have inside your own mind, which is going to make you more reactive to your partner. It's an ugly cycle that starts happening because, again, you're making their behavior and the way they're acting or speaking or conducting themselves, you're making it personal about you and about how they're treating you. So it's really important to stay away from that. The other side effect is for the person themselves that's being told they're not listening to someone. Again, normally it's not about people choosing not to listen to someone. It's normally something else going on. Either they didn't hear you, either they're filtering, they thought you meant something else, or they're outright choosing to do something else and don't want to. But all of those you want to address for what it is instead of labeling it as not listening. So what starts happening is you tell this person you're not listening to me when it has nothing to do with them listening or not listening. And they're going to start feeling more disconnected. They're going to start feeling like they want to move further away because it doesn't feel good to be told you're not listening when you are.
Yeah, it really shuts people down, I think. It's invalidating. And because it's not specific enough and too vague, or I guess too general, I think it makes it very disorientating for the other person to hear it because they're not sure what exactly they were doing or not doing to not listen or to convey this to you. And so when it gets brought up multiple times, but for very various reasons, people can get very confused. And then they start to feel like every topic or their behavior is setting you off, but they don't know what exactly is setting you off. So when things are too general and not specific or concrete, it can lead to people feeling like they need to walk on eggshells. Like each topic or each thing they might do is a landmine. So we really want to be careful and mindful about correcting this in a way that feels restorative and specific so that people can actually show up and have some behavioral change.
Yeah. And I think another aspect to all of this, you brought it up actually before we started this podcast, is the shoulds.
Yeah, if you heard me, you should have done it. If you were listening, then I wouldn't have to repeat myself.
Right. And what's the problem there?
These are expectations that were not agreed upon. These are judgments that sometimes, like we're talking about, has nothing to do with listening or not listening.
So what should be done differently?
I think we hit on some of those, right? Like, can you be more specific? Can you give ownership to how you are actually feeling? And can you be curious? We had a recent example at our kiddo's school. Our son, Gavin, he's in pre-K, kindergarten. He's 5, and the teacher had given me feedback that, oh, like Gavin's been acting really strange. He hasn't been listening. And I was like, oh, okay. And I wasn't quite sure what that meant about what he was doing or not doing in the class that made it so he was like having a naughty day.
Yeah. And if she's saying that to him, it's going to be confusing to him because now he doesn't know what behavior to adjust.
Yeah. And the funny part is, like, 3 weeks later, she comes back to me and say, you know what? I figured out why he hasn't been paying attention. I was like, oh, okay. She was like, he's just bored. He finishes his worksheets way faster and he starts doing other things. And she's like, actually, it got better since I've given him more advanced worksheets. So I'm like, wow, okay. So it wasn't about listening. It was about the fact that he actually did follow instructions. He completed his worksheets and then he just started playing around.
Right. He got bored and wanted to do something because there's nothing to do. And that's not about listening. So again, if she treats it as you're not listening, it's going to fuse the kid. And then you got a problem with the dynamics between the relationship versus if she just explored, tried to discover, she would have found the actual issue and been able to deal with it like she was in the end. And that's why this concept we're talking about, not only is it important within a romantic relationship with your partner, it's also really important in parenting and working with kids. I think there's one other thing to mention about the shoulds. If you do catch yourself going, well, they should have listened to me, they should have done this. It's important to catch these and notice them because what you're doing is you're judging somebody else. And as soon as you start judging someone else, that's also going to create a distance and a friction in a relationship. We want to get away from the shoulds and more get to what is or isn't and have conversations about things, right? It's not about, well, you should have gone and done this because I asked you to. It's more about, hey, I noticed this thing didn't happen. Can you tell me more? So I'm getting away from the shoulds and I'm getting into exploration. I'm getting into what is or isn't and looking at what might we do about it.
I think it's also easy to become defensive when someone accuses us of not listening.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we get away from the actual goal or objective of the original conversation and the tasks or the things that need to get done, right? So then we get defensive. We might start kitchen sinking, which is like you start saying, well, you did this and I asked you this and you also don't listen, so an argument starts or a fight starts instead of going, oh, yeah, maybe I didn't hear you. Or can you tell me again what I didn't hear? Or this is what I heard you say. What needs to be done? Right? So we want to look at ways to move the conversation forward so that we can accomplish tasks and goals. So the next time someone accuses you of not listening, try being curious. Try asking for specific things. Try asking for a pause.
It's important that if someone tells you you're not listening, to not try to get pulled into that trap of getting defensive and seeing that it's starting to become personal, and just ask more information. If you can, if you're not triggered. Just say, well, what do you mean exactly? What does listening mean to you? What is it that you were looking for that you didn't receive from me? So you're going to start trying to help them articulate better of what actually is happening that they are now associating with listening.
There are times where we need to pause because we are elevated and we both are not listening to each other.
Well, I wouldn't call it not listening to each other. It's that the brain is literally in a state it can't hear each other, right? Because if I'm not listening to you, it's all about me not listening to you, right? It's a personal thing versus it's not my brain sitting here going, oh, I don't want to listen to you. It's my brain is so caught up in reactivity. It's filtering so much because of negative core beliefs. It's so activated that the brain literally can't hear what you're saying anymore. It's going to filter all that information. And even if I want to be quote unquote listening to you and I'm giving it all my effort to listen to you, my brain's going to work against me in that moment.
That's a great emphasis, Jason. Just knowing that a lot of times it's an involuntary action that's happening, not an intentional action. And again, talking about little Gavin, if he intentionally doesn't want to hear, he will stick his fingers in his ears and he will shake his head and go, no, 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 no. So we as adults, we don't do that. But as you're pointing out, Jason, there are mechanisms in our brains and the way we operate that can filter, that can block. And I would even say there's moments where I can feel myself dissociating, feel myself shutting down, feel my throat closing up, or feeling paralyzed to respond, or that I'm like processing the information still. So I'm not responding.
But it's important because we're only going to add fuel to the flames in these moments if we look at our partner and say, you're not listening to me. Because your partner might be doing everything they can to listen to you. It's just their brain's working against them. So takeaway points. First off, using the word you're not listening to me or the phrase, we'd encourage you to get away from it. Instead, try to point out whatever is actually happening or get curious. Or if everybody's too activated, take a pause. Remember, saying you're not listening to me when people feel like they're listening to you is going to create a problem within the relationship. It's going to create some dynamics that you don't want happening that's not going to be fun or healthy for you guys.
So try using some of these tips and recommendations to help you avoid falling into that you're not listening fight.
If you found this session helpful, consider sharing it with someone who might need it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real conversations about mental health, happiness, and how we keep going even when life gets tangled. Until next time, keep showing up, stay curious, and remember, the mess is the method.